So as I remember, and it's been a long time, I think the Enlightenment was a European 17th, 18th century or so movement, change in thinking, where people started to think about everything from God, society, government, law, all of these sort of things, and thought about it differently. I'm sure I had hypotheses in the past for why it might have happened, but I don't remember them now. We've done a lot of work on nucleoside modified mRNA. And what that is it's a modification to standard messenger RNA. What messenger RNA is that all of our genes, all of the proteins that make our body are encoded in our DNA. The way the body makes a protein is that a messenger RNA copies one of those codes from the DNA and brings it to a machine known as a ribosome that reads the code and makes the corresponding protein. So the mRNA is kind of the middleman. And when we give it as a vaccine or a therapeutic, we're supplying just the code to make that protein. And the cells of the body make the protein. For a vaccine, the body sees it as foreign and makes a response to attack whatever that protein comes from, virus, bacteria, etc. So we had started working on vaccines 20 years ago and worked on them ever since. And we worked on HIV and influenza and many different pathogens. We knew probably around 2015 that we had a brand new vaccine platform that worked incredibly well. We first published it in 2017 for the Zika pandemic. We knew that we had a great vaccine years and years before COVID ever hit. I had a friend who worked at the Wuhan Virologic Institute that I would talk to every so often. And I guess it was around October or November of 2019, he became concerned. And he told me that there was a new respiratory infection spreading around the city, and people were dying, and it was spreading very rapidly. And everybody in Wuhan was very nervous because it was getting out of control. So I knew at that point in time that there was a potential for something bad to happen. When the sequence was released in January of 2020, and it had already spread around much of the world, everybody knew it was a pandemic. We knew in October that our vaccine would probably be useful. So the minute the sequence was released, we started working on the vaccine. Katie and I started working together in 1997, and we both had our own labs and worked independently, but collaborated closely. At present, I have about 50 wet bench scientists in my labs. Every senior person has their own projects that they work on. Some work on vaccines for norovirus or C. diff or malaria, tuberculosis, influenza, HIV. Some work on treatments for genetic diseases, doing gene therapy for sickle cell anemia. We've got a lot of different projects that are each run by a different group in the lab. So everybody has their own projects that they're in charge of and they run. Everybody collaborates together to help get those projects to the finish line. So those companies license the technology from Penn to use nucleoside modified mRNA. We've worked closely with BioNTech for probably going on 8 or 9 years, and showed them our vaccine platform and how it works. Uh, Moderna, we worked with early on in their formation. They both made slightly different vaccines. They use our modified RNA, they use the lipid nanoparticles that we described. So they're not identical because there's minor differences, but they're the same vaccine. So both companies license the technology from Penn and use that to make the vaccines. When a company licenses from a university, they pay money in royalties. The royalties are a percent of profit. So the university gets a percent of the profit that any companies make from what they develop. We have a close relationship with BioNTech. They fund us to do a lot of different types of research for them. And it's common for biotech and pharmaceutical companies to collaborate, to fund, to work with universities to develop their ideas. Collaboration is really the most critical element of research. For a lay audience, what they have to understand is that there are so many different elements of research that go into every project. So with modified RNA LNPs, we work with bioengineers who design lipid nanoparticles. We work with liquid chemists who make the lipid nanoparticles. We work with virologists and immunologists and biochemists and many different fields. The way you work with those groups is you collaborate with them, especially for international programs. You collaborate with local universities, biochemists, biotechs, other entities. And that gives you the ability to reach across the world and to help develop new therapies, new products anywhere in the world. Today, things have become very interesting. Back when Jenner first started the smallpox vaccine, and for every vaccine that came after that, there were always people who were nervous about it, who didn't want to take it. There was a variety of reasons. The principal ones were that they didn't understand. They didn't understand the science. They were nervous about the science. It was brand new. When Jenner opened up a pox on a cow and injected it into people, people thought he was going to turn them into cows. Uh, so it's It's just people don't understand. What's happened in the COVID pandemic is that misunderstanding has turned into overdrive. And it's gone from misunderstanding to misinformation. So you've got a lot of people who are lying to the population and telling them RNA vaccines make you sterile, RNA vaccines make you infertile, they give you cancer, they make you magnetic. There's chips from Bill Gates. All of these things are absolutely insane and have been proven to be incorrect. But there's a large group of people, and they're mainly less educated white people who have felt the world is against them, who believe that this is just another way for the government, for society, for scientists to attack them and make their lives difficult. So to me, it's more of a sociology problem, that there's just a large group of people who look for ways to not understand things and use that as a way of fighting and as a way of fighting back. It's an enormous problem and it's getting worse. And I worry that it's going to keep getting worse. I was constantly asked to respond, but both from journalists, from lay people, from threatening emails and texts, from threatening letters, from threatening people who were attacking me and calling me a mass murderer for making the vaccine. The issue is, and in part I blame it on social media, because social media gives anybody with a bullhorn a voice to be heard by everybody. If you look at the data, they found about 13 physicians in the United States who accounted for about 70% of the misinformation on vaccines, who are on the internet, on social media, constantly saying vaccines are bad. When they were investigated, they were found to have their own made up homeopathic treatments for COVID. And what they were actually saying is, don't take the vaccine, take my treatment. My treatment will work, the vaccine will make you sick. So they were doing it purely for money. I don't know if they believed that vaccines were bad, but they saw it as a way to con the population and make money. So it becomes problematic. And the politicians aren't any better, because the politicians had a huge group of base supporters who didn't trust the government, didn't trust science, didn't trust vaccines, and they played into that and they supported that thinking. So now you've got politicians telling people not to take vaccines in order to get more power. And to me, that's criminal. Those are two separate things. To distribute the message, we've formed an institute at Penn that is trying to figure out how to do that. And what we've identified so far is that there are many different groups, and each group needs a different message. So African Americans have a different reason for not trusting the vaccine than do conservative rural people. So a different message is needed. The first thing you have to recognize, there's a core group of people that are never going to listen and are never going to hear your message. We don't spend time trying to convince them. There's larger groups of people who aren't sure. who haven't made up their minds yet. Those are the people that you need to address. So it's going to be an incredibly difficult problem, but we have a big group working on it. And the hope is to come up with a variety of messages for each of these groups and then figure out how to get those messages out. I suspect it's going to involve clergy in the regions, community leaders, respected people. So the message comes from the community, not from an outside group who's trying to say you have to do this. As far as equity, that's something that I've worked on my entire career. My definition of equity is getting access to new therapeutics and new vaccines across the world. We saw this as an enormous problem for COVID-19. The vaccine was made in Europe and America, and it was mainly distributed to the US and America and a couple of other wealthy countries. Sub-Saharan Africa, Southeast Asia, South America did not get RNA vaccine. They got 10,000, 20,000 doses through COVID for populations of 50, 100, 200 million people. That to me is a problem. Early on in the pandemic, I started working with a group in Bangkok, Thailand, where we made our own RNA vaccine and we built a GMP production site. GMP production is the quality of drug you need to give to people. So we built everything we needed in Southeast Asia, and they're now distributing their drug across their local populations. We've built 18 of these GMP sites across the world in South America, Sub-Saharan Africa, Southeast Asia, Eastern Europe, and anywhere else that's interested, giving local populations, local academics access to drug production. So they can now come up with whatever vaccines they think they need. For many regions, the vaccines are of less interest to pharmaceuticals because they're diseases of poor areas, malaria, dengue, tularemia, Crimean Congo, and many others. We're now trying to give access to developing those vaccines to the regions where the diseases are most severe.